Now we'll look at some of the pollinators. All right, one of the first groups of pollinators we're interested in are the bees, and the four shown here. The upper left is a carpenter bee. Notice that it has some yellow seedy on the thorax, but it is just solid black on the abdomen, characteristic of carpenter bees. Bumblebees will have yellow pilosity or sometimes red hairs on the abdomen. Carpenter bees, they're just one very common species here. They're in old fence posts, old logs, cedar posts. They're very beneficial. They're fantastic pollinators. And if you've got some blue mist flower, you'll notice one thing is the carpenter bees all over it. The other day we were out in Marion at a nursery, and there are carpenter bees all over the place, flying around the native plants. There's a small carpenter bee, only about 3/8 of an inch to a 1/2 inch long, and it's one that you don't see too often because it's a small bee. The one on the upper right is our classic honeybee. You see the pollen basket on the hind legs. The lower left is the megachilid or leaf-cutting bee. Notice the yellow undersurface of the abdomen. That's all pollen that's collected. A fantastic pollinator. Now, if you've got some roses sitting around or some crepe myrtle and you see little notches cut out of the edge of the leaves, these are the guys that do it. Leaf cutters will cut it out. They take the leaves back to underground nests and construct a leaf nest with various sections in it. Each section will have pollen and an egg for a developing larva. And the illustration photograph on the lower right is a sweat bee, and they're fairly common. It's an excellent pollinator, and there are many species in this area and many genera of native bees. There's probably over 600 species of native bees in the Austin area. And they're around. They're the things that do the work. The honeybee is an introduced, a foreign a species that I think the reason people love honeybees is the honey, because in many cases their pollinating ability is surpassed by the native bees. Native bees work earlier, they work later, and in different climatic conditions, a little bit better conditions. All right, beetles. Beetles are pollinators too. Now, we're growing these plants. We have these wonderful things out in our yard, and they say, oh, look at the dirty beetles. Well, hey, beetles got to eat, but you can stand a little bit of damage done to your plants. And unless you're growing them for a contest or have a special variety of plant, and many times those special varieties of plants are introduced species. So native plants are the ones that we're mostly interested in. The beetle in the upper left, good pollinator, it's a black blister beetle. Don't ever pick those up because the intersegmental regions, they will ooze a liquid. It's a vesiculating oil, and it will cause blisters on your skin. In Europe, they had one, Lita vesicatoria, and that's where they brought a drug called cantharidin, which was used as an aphrodisiac, and the people that would take it generally died of kidney destruction because it is highly toxic. Horses, every so often, hay will get into a place, and the farmer has picked up the hay, and embedded in the hay are pockets of blister beetles. Not necessarily this one, but one of the striped blister beetles. And it doesn't take too many to kill a horse. Many years ago, a former graduate student at Texas State phoned me from Florida. He said, do you know anything about blister beetles? I said, why? He says his wife worked for a horse breeder, and he just lost $3 million worth of race horses because he bought some hay from Oklahoma, and embedded in the hay were pockets of blister beetles. So they aren't good animals, but they are pollinators. So the one on the two on the right is a scarab beetle. They run around, eat a little bit of pollen. They drink a little nectar. They chew a few a part of the floral structures, but they are good pollinators. The one on the lower left is a soldier beetle. It also is very common, good pollinator. The one in the middle and the bottom is a tumbling flower beetle. You may have seen some of those on your native plants, and you say, oh, look at the beetle, and you're pointing to that, all of a sudden, boom, it's gone, it drops off. It tumbled off the flower. That's thus the name. How about that? All right, the one on the lower right is a jewel beetle. I've generally just called a bupressor. It's a metallic wood-boring beetle. There are many species. They're good pollinators. Sometimes you will find a field of wildflowers along the roadway, and you start looking at those things, and lo and behold, each one will have 2 or 3 jewel beetles in it. So it's feeding on the pollen, it's feeding on a little bit of the nectar, but the pollen primarily, but there's stem borers in some plant around. But they do damage in larval state, and the adults are rather interesting. In fact, it's a favorite of many insect collectors. All right, the flies. Flies, many of those species are also good pollinators. The one in the upper left is a hoverfly or a syrphid fly. It's marked much like a bee. It's warning coloration on that. Some predator comes up and says, oh, I better leave that dude alone. It's going to sting me. No, that's a hoverfly. You may have set out your backyard one time and you sit there, you have a glass of tea, and all of a sudden this little thing comes up and goes over to your knee and just goes, sits around on your knee and then backs up. Sometimes you can hold out a finger and the thing will come up, sit on the end of your finger. There are many species of the hoverflies, but they are excellent pollinators. In fact, the larvae love aphids. They gobble them up like candy. An excellent species to have in your yard. The one in the lower left is also another species of hoverfly. The upper middle and the lower right are bee flies. They look much like bees, good pollinators. You see all the hairs on the body. They rummage around the flower heads looking for anything to feed on. They don't have jaw mouth parts. They have different types of mouth parts, but they feed on the nectar in there and they gather the pollen, gets all over them. But they are also parasites of many ground-dwelling bees, unfortunately. And then the fly in the upper right is a botfly, because it is in the flower head of a plant that smells like rotten flesh. The carrion plants. And so if you have a carrion plant there, oh, is that a sticky plant? If you want to look for a pollinator, look for a blowfly, because they're attracted to the odor of decay. Butterflies and moths, they also pollinate. Now, it's interesting, I noticed on the New Braunfels chapter information board, storyboard in the corner, they talk about, oh, I saw a caterpillar and I like butterfly. Remember that caterpillars eat plants. The butterflies, they love plants. They feed on the nectar. They feed on the pollen. They have long siphony mouth parts, so they can pick up this material. They fly from one plant flower, go to another one, to another one. They transfer pollen. They work as good pollinators. The upper left is the eastern black swallowtail. The lower left is the common buckeye. Thank you very much. You know, today I looked at that name a half a dozen times. On the way over here, I told like, I don't remember that name. But you get so old, that short-term memory goes to it's gone. So I've had trouble. But the middle one now That is the silver-spotted skipper. And the lower right is the hawk moth or sphinx moth, and the one above it is another moth. So moths and butterflies make good pollinators because they're rummaging around flowers for nectar. Now, parasites are parasitoids. We all know that parasites are something that feeds in or on another organism. A parasitoid does the same thing, but it generally parasitizes a member of the same class of organisms. So you'll find many insects that are parasitoids on other insects. They're generally a little bit smaller, sometimes just only a little tiny bit smaller, but they live and get their nutrition from a relative, a host organism. All right, now you'll find a lot of these names. You don't remember them, you don't care about learning them, and they're just pain, but they have no common names. The Aphelinid Wasps, very small, and you see, what are they going to feed on? They are parasites of whiteflies, scale insects, and aphids. Now, a lot of these beasts that we're looking at this evening, they're found that they bother a lot of our cultivated plants we have, not a lot of the native plants. Because you grow the native plants, you may not see a lot of aphids on the plant. You may never see a lot of scales on the plant unless you have a variety that came from someplace else. Because the plants that are native here are grown here, they've already established the ecological relationship with those that eat it and those that destroy it and those that benefit. They already have their communities established. Where we have problems is when we grow things from someplace else, because we bring them in, there are no natural predators, parasites that will regulate those populations. That's when you get a lot of our vegetables we grow. They aren't American, they're from someplace else. And so a lot of the organisms here say, oh man, something to eat. But there's nothing around to kill the things that are doing the eating. So these small little wasps, you'll see the one in the illustration on the photograph on the left, a little tiny thing. I hope this works. There it is. See, this is an aphid. There's a wasp. So it's going to oviposit or lay an egg inside that wasp. The wasp eventually becomes a mummy. The wasp develops inside, the aphid's dead, doesn't feed anymore, and the wasp emerges to attack other aphids. So the host population is big, the parasite population is small, but the more parasites you get, eventually it will overtake that host population, the aphids. That population crashes, then you have a lot of parasitoids running around, but nothing to eat. So it's the parasite or parasitoid population that always lags behind the size of the host, but at least you can get rid of that. You grow some plants in a greenhouse, and all of a sudden you go out someday and you find all of these mealy bugs on my plant. What do? Well, put them outside. In a few days, what happens? No more mealy bugs. Because there's things that out there that eat mealy bugs, not in the greenhouse, but they're outside in nature. So this is an advantage to move things around a little bit. All right, let's see what. Oh, Brachonid wasps. Now these wasps are maybe ½ inch long, some a little bit smaller, and again, some larger. See what they attack? Caterpillars. The two top images are ovipositing or laying an egg in the caterpillar. Now, when you get a caterpillar that size, it's already done a lot of eating of your plant. But anyway, there won't be a second generation from those because they are food for the wasp larva. The one down here, you see that image right there. All right, that is not an egg, that's a pupal case of a wasp parasite. It's gobbled up the inside of the inchworm. There are, I think, 4 or 5 of those cocoons sitting on the outside. And they've already eaten the internal organs of that caterpillar, and it's going to die. And what you have then are the pupae of the wasp. Then Trichogrammid Wasps. Most of you have heard those. You can buy them at some nurseries to take care of some of the caterpillars you have around your place. And you see, that's an egg of a caterpillar. There's another egg. That's the size of the Trichogrammid wasp. A lot of places will say, you want to get rid of caterpillars? Get some of those wasps. Yeah, great. But it's really not, it could be ill-advised because there's been so many billions of these wasps raised that sometimes the genetic quality is not what it originally was. So you got to keep rejuvenating these. But there's an awful lot of wasps that are brought in the United States raised to kill certain pest species.
Can I ask a question, Don?
Uh-huh.
So do they only prey on specific kinds of caterpillars?
No, any caterpillar egg.
So anybody here who is buying butterfly plants, you're not going to have, if you're buying those for your vegetable garden, you're going to have a crossover there. And not only that, caterpillars are also food for birds. So if you are gardening with trees with berries, etc., for birds, then you're also limiting what they have to feed their young, because all young eat caterpillars in birds. So I would suggest that be extremely judicious in bringing in outsiders to your garden to if you have tomato hornworms, for example, just plant more tomatoes, give them more fertilizer so they're very verdant. They have lots of leaves, and the hornworms you can put on those, and then your other tomato plants should be fine.
That's really very true. Some of those parasitoids that you acquire, a lot of them work best in a greenhouse situation because it's a confined area. Out in the wild, it all depends on what species you're doing. There's a big field of biological pest control, and a lot of it is very successful, but it's not something that you start one day and you finish a week later. It takes years of study of working out the biology of these. To be sure that the one you introduce and you're developing is going to attack something beneficial that you really want. All right, Tiphiid wasps, hosts are white grubs, and there's your white grub. You see the wasp ovipositing on the white grub. The white grub we're talking about is the thing that's in your lawn, not those big caterpillars that big larvae we see in the ox beetle or the Hercules beetle. These are the things that will do some of the damage to your lawns. We need to go back. Ichneumonid wasp. Notice the very slender waist, characteristic of ichneumons, that very slender waist here and then the large out. This is a male. These are females. That's the ovipositor. This is the ovipositor here. So the ovipositor, in this case, it's not going to sting you. These are long. There are 3 sections to an ovipositor, and the egg slides down the middle of those 3 sections and is introduced into the larva that is being parasitized. And some of these have the ability on the end of the ovipositor to saw and work its way through rotting logs because it knows there is a beetle grub inside there somewhere and it will lay an egg on that. So I've only seen that happen once. It was in California. I saw this rotten log, and lo and behold, there was one of these Ichneumonid. The whole insect was maybe 1.5 to 2 inches long, and the ovipositor looped over the abdomen and down into the wood. It was drilling into the wood. The ovipositor was about 3 inches long. So it's really an interesting phenomenon to see. All right, Tachinid flies. Almost look like a blowfly, doesn't it? Well, these, notice how woolly these things are. Those are bristles on the abdomen. All the Tachinids have really hairy, woolly abdomens, bristly things with these very stiff bristles on it. And all of them are parasites of other insects, a whole bunch of them. So they're all good guys. Predators. Well, let's see what is doing the eating now. Something's stuff. See, not all earwigs are bad. These guys are good. They go ahead and eat other insects in the compost pile. All of the small, soft-bodied things they'll go ahead and eat. There's not a lot of species of earwigs that do this, but there are some. This one, they
will be shutting down in 15 minutes. The library will be closing in 30. If you need to get a library card, please come to the help desk at this time.
I'll do that. Thank you. The striped and spine-tailed earwigs, those are fairly large ones. You've probably seen them out in the yard occasionally. They're about 1 inch long. The praying mantis. All right, they're the adult praying mantis, and it's going to rip off the head of that grasshopper. And you know, the praying mantis, they're rather interesting, because you get a big praying mantis and you get a little concerned when you see one sitting on the branch next to your hummingbird feeder. Yeah. So you need to watch, especially if it's a large mantid. And they bite. They'll draw blood if they decide to bite you. But anyway, look at this. See, that is the egg case of a praying mantid. They're flat on the bottom. They have many, many eggs inside. They hatch, and you see the young nymphal, newly emerged young ones over here. Now, I want you to remember what this structure looks like, because you'll see an egg case of a tent caterpillar. And tent caterpillars will have this egg case completely around the stem, but these are flat on the bottom, generally flat on the surface. They may be on the side of a tree, on the side of your house, on anything, but they're flattened. But it's the egg case of praying mantis. Ambush bugs. A lot of times you don't see ambush bugs. They're a few far between. They're uglier than sin. But boy, now when we say bug, this is a true bug. It has piercing, sucking mouth parts. So it'll feed on a lot of soft-bodied insects, and they thrust their mouth parts in it and then introduce enzymes and make it in a soluble form. Big-eyed bugs. Now, another true bug, big-eyed bug, but it's a tiny bug. The bug is only about 1/4 inch long, but notice it's feeding on another bug. That's a true bug, sucking insect. And here's one feeding on another organism, another bug. And there's the bug there with its mouth parts. And here's the big-eyed bug, another view of it. So they like feeding on aphids and scale insects and other small things they can capture. Minute pirate bug, loves aphids and scales. It's feeding on the scale insects here. Look at the mouth parts. Now, one thing in sucking insects, if the mouth parts can be thrust and stick out straight out of the front of the head and are fairly short, those are generally predatory. The green stink bug has long mouth parts, and it generally goes down and lies between the legs on the ventral surface. So it doesn't ever thrust out straight. And this one is fairly easy to recognize. The markings are characteristic of the minute pirate bug. Assassin bugs. Oh boy. Now there's many species in the family of assassin bugs. And this one almost looks like the milkweed assassin bug, but notice it's feeding on the beetle there. Can't see precisely what's feeding on over there, but there are small mouth parts underneath. There it is, that mouth part right over there. That's what they will raise. And to keep in mind, if you're seeing a lot of the insects out on your plants, and you've got a lot of the same kind of insect, generally that's going to be a damaging insect because the number of predators to the prey are going to be much less. There's not a lot of assassin bugs running around with respect to the number of prey running around, because those assassin bugs can feed on a lot of specimens during the day, but they don't want to be in direct competition with one another. So anytime you see a lot of nymphs or adult insects that all look the same in a fairly concentrated area, those are the pestiferous ones. The good guys are generally few and far between. All right, the wheel bug. You probably all have seen one of the wheel bugs. There, that wheel on the back, that's the pronotal menace. But look at the mouth parts. See, they're short mouth parts on it. Short over there, and it's feeding on the insect there, that's prey. Not too many wheel bugs around. You'll find them every so often, and you don't want to pick them up because your finger would be as tasty as a pest. And they do bite. I moved a tree, a young tree, and put it back to the car to take somewhere one day. And I get in there, and, man, why'd you bit me? Looked at my arm, smacked this thing off. It was a wheel bug. It was disturbed and chapped that I had bothered it, taking it off the tree. So it had bit me, and then I had a dark spot in my arm for about 3 weeks. And they do feed, but what hurts in it is the thing that gets the tissue in solution. It's got enzymes in the fluid that it introduces into the organism. All right, now throw this one in, because this has been of some concern to a number of people in the last few years. The kissing bug. And I put this up here, I wrote that this afternoon, instead of saying a lot about it. This thing is an assassin bug. It's in the assassin bug family. It is known as a kissing bug because notice what this thing will suck blood from. Sucks blood from your cats, dogs, armadillos, skunks, possums, wood rats, bats. A lot of those mammals we have around our property. Did I write raccoon? Oh, raccoons, I left off. Too bad. But when these things are resting, sleeping, the insects will get in there and they feed on them. Now, they are vectors of what is called Chagas disease, and it's a protozoan, a blood protozoan, and it's very serious and bad. But fortunately, in the United States, most of those kissing bugs that we have, when they defecate, it's generally after they fed. So they'll be someplace else and they'll defecate there. The trouble in South America is those species predominantly defecate while they're feeding. And if a person is sleeping and they're being bitten, they go and smack that bug. No, rub that spot that hurts. They rub the protozoan from the feces into the skin. Our dogs pick up Chagas disease because when a bug bites the dog's gonna bite that bug. And the protozoans penetrate the mucous membranes in the mouth. So that's the main problem. But so you never want to pick one of these up. If you step on it, squash it, oh, I'm gonna get rid of that thing, you pick it up, and you've got a cut in your finger, something like that. when you squeeze it, pick up the guts. There'll be some fecal material from the hindgut get on your hands, and you can end up infecting yourself. Anyway, that is a by the way thing. All right, spine soldier bug. All right, here's another sucking bug. It looks like a stink bug. Well, it is a stink bug, but it's a good kind. There's the eggs of it. Interesting eggs. There's the immature. Notice feeding on a caterpillar. There's the adult feeding on another caterpillar. The short mouth parts, and they are beneficial stink bugs. So all stink bugs are not bad guys. The two-spotted stink bug, another predatory one. Look at down here. Isn't that nice? That is the larva of a leaf beetle that they're draining dry. Predatory plant bug. Plant bugs as a group of insects. There are many, many species, but most of them are injurious to the plants. But this particular one is a good guy, and you can always recognize a plant bug because all plant bugs will have this little cleft or little bend down of the wingtips in the back of the abdomen. Characteristic of plant bugs. It's in the family called Muridae. So it's I've got mirrored plant bugs. Tarnished plant bug is one of those. Damsel bug. All right, another, you're getting tired of hearing about bugs. But see, not all bugs are going to be bad guys. Again, here, the damsel bug is another predatory insect on the caterpillars. Now, thrips. Thrips are bad guys in plants. They cause malformations of your flower buds and flower bud drop and nasty things. Well, those are many species of thrips, but there are some good thrips. And this is one that you can acquire commercially that will feed on other thrips and other insects, small, soft-bodied insects. Lacewings. You may have seen the lacewing eggs on each one on a stalk. There's the larva. This thing comes out of the egg, and it loves to feed on aphids and scale insects and other things. So they have sickle-shaped mouth parts, and they're hollow or grooved tube-like structures, and they grab these things and away they go. It's interesting what nature's done. It's made these eggs on the end of a stalk, because when the eggs hatch, the larva crawls down the stalk. Then it looks for something to eat. Now, if the one just hatched, crawled down, waited around to see who else is coming, they may end up as a meal for the brother or sister. So nature has somewhat done that. So when these larvae come down, they move off looking for something to eat.
Do whitefly eggs look something?
Oh, what a what?
Whitefly eggs, do they hang off on a little?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is character. Sometimes you find those on a side of a door, underneath a workbench, on the plants, at least somewhere, but there'll be a group of them. All right, ground beetles. Well, what do they do? Feed on all kinds of crop pests. And this, I put a name on this one today. It's the orange grub snail-eater. And this one, look at a poor, earthworm eater too. This one was brought into the United States in 1908 in the Northeast US to get rid of gypsy moth. And so it has spread all over, and it's a good predator, unfortunately, of earthworms, but it feeds on earthworms and slugs and other kinds of nasty beasts. Notice the jaws or mandibles of the ground beetles. they're generally what they call prognathous. That means in the front jaw, that these things run around. They're fast runners. They zip around, grab caterpillars and gobble them up. Grab other kinds of insects, gobble them up. They're fast runners. Many are active at night. Some of them even climb trees to get at the larvae. Found out the name of this one today, Andrew's snail-eating beetle. All right, another ground beetle, a funny looking thing, but that's sure not a snail. That's going to be a millipede of some form. But it is a good predatory beetle, another fast runner. The fiery searcher on the left and the caterpillar hunter on the right. We have lots of these around here. They're over an inch long, run fast. You find them in your yard. When you pick them up, all of a sudden, oh boy, they stink. Well, you handle them. They don't like to be handled. So they have a obnoxious odor that they release as a defense mechanism. I imagine if you were a mouse after them, you would say, bleh, and run off. All right, more ground beetles, caterpillars, dead insects. So they're recyclers too.
The last computer session has ended.
Oh,
The
that's right.
library is closing in 15 minutes. If you have materials to check out or need to get a library card, please come to the help desk now.
Anyone need a library card? All right, tiger beetles. Now, the tiger beetles have just been, a few years ago, moved into the family containing the ground beetles. It had its own family time. Those are the neatest things in the world. Notice the sickle shape or crossing jaws there. They bite and they can run fast and they fly fast. A lot of these around, many of them in sandy situations. There's the larva. It's as predatory and as dangerous as the adults are. It has a couple of hooks on the back end of the body, and it can wedge itself in a hole in the ground and lay its head flat, and another bug runs over the top of it. It's food. So those are good. They're hard to catch, even with an insect net. I have run chasing, there's hundreds of these things on the ground near a river, the sandy bank. I said, oh, and I run after that. I'm swinging the net back and forth. I will have 2 or 3 of them because they can run faster than me and they fly. And so, and when you pick them up, you can take net and find them on the ground. You crawl and you flop over like that. Then you go up, get it in there and grab onto that beetle and watch where the jaws are so you don't get your fingers in the way because they will bite. Rove beetles. Interesting fact about rove beetles. There are over 63,000 species of rove beetles. There are more. That is the largest group of beetles known with all those species on a worldwide basis, over 63,000. And they are predatory. They will eat other rove beetles. They eat all kinds of insects. They're ground dwellers. They eat the things in the soil. They eat things above the soil. Several of them are associated with decaying bodies and will feed on fly maggots and fly eggs in decomposition cycles. So rove beetles are rather interesting. All of them typically have very short wing covers. They can fly. Some of them can cause problems. You get one of the little ones fly in your eye sometime. You end up having conjunctivitis because the secretor material that is not very nice. Soldier beetles, we've looked at these before, very common pollinators and predators. Checkered beetles. A lot of these are predatory on the larvae of insects that are found under bark. They can tell when there's a prey species under the bark. Because the insects, they release pheromones, and a lot of the beetles will release pheromones and say, hey, I've got some eggs here and there's some larvae developing of my species, so don't lay eggs here. and a member of the same species won't overplus. But then the checkered beetle comes along and says, food. And so it'll go underneath, lay some eggs, and the larvae go feed on the insects that are under the bark. Lady beetles. Wow, we love lady beetles. Convergent lady beetle here. There's the two converging dots on the pronotum. And this, oh, that's the one we have so commonly now, the Asian multicolored beetle. Now, unusual, that one is beneficial. It loves aphids, loves scale insects. It really is a good feeder in the yard, does all kinds of neat things. But during the winter months, it needs a place to hide. Where's a nice, comfy place to hide? In your house, or in your junction box, or in the light switch case. But like, you'll get we have them in our house every winter. Oh, look, there's a ladybird I'm seeing. Oh, there's one that lamp. Just leave them there. They don't eat much.
Are there any other lady beetles that are solid colored? Are those some?
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of, there's some that are all black, 2 red spots called the twice-stabbed lady beetle. There's some called the 17-spotted lady beetle, the 12-spotted lady beetle, 7-spotted lady beetle, the 5-spotted lady beetle, and some are solid, many are spotted. And when they are red and black, they are generally noxious because that is a warning coloration. You don't want to eat one because it can pick up toxic materials from the plants on which they're feed, or the insects, on the insects that we're feeding on a noxious plant. So it's a warning coloration when you see red and black. This one down here, there's the cottony cushion scale, and there's the predator of the cottony cushion scale.
Are they not true bugs? So we should be saying lady beetle.
I beg your pardon?
They're lady beetles, not ladybugs.
They're call them lady beetles. You can call it a ladybird beetle. Don't call them lady bugs. They aren't bugs, they are beetles. I'm not fussing at you, but the common names, what do? Oh, I'm an entomologist. Oh, you study bugs. No, I study lice, but that's beside the point. So bugs represent the insects that have piercing, sucking mouth parts, like stink bugs, assassin bugs, broad-eyed bugs, those things. So that technically it refers to a certain kind. Then they're trying to, many publications now are trying to either use ladybird beetles or lady beetles as the common name. All right, now there's a lady beetle larva. This is a particular one, it's called, it's a mealy bug destroyer. This one looks like a mealy bug, but this is where it's best to know what you have in your yard, because you see something like this, you sure don't want to kill it, because that is the larval stage of a lady beetle, one particular species. Many of them look like this. Some are red and black, red and yellow. But look at the aphids. And this beast loves aphids. So you don't want to kill it, but then I'll show you an illustration, a photograph in a little bit that shows one mealy bug, and it looks very similar to this. There's also hoverflies we mentioned earlier, and see the larvae is an ugly maggot, but it's feeding on the aphids. Ants, field ants, they love to eat all kinds of insects. They're good recyclers and good predators. Mud daubers, also a good group. They stuff their cells with insects, and some species will even pick up specific kinds of spiders. Certain species will stuff black widow spiders in the egg case in the home where the egg is deposited. And paper wasp. We don't like paper wasp, but remember Malcolm Beck? He said, don't get rid of that wasp nest above your door. It's a good guy, because what you do if you have webworms or tent caterpillars in your pecan trees in your backyard, break them open with a long pole, expose the larvae to the wasps. The paper wasps pick up the insect larvae and feed on it. So paper wasps are very beneficial. Potter wasps, they make a little nice ceramic pot. In fact, they make better ceramic pots than I do. And this is the potter wasp, thin waist, but expanded there. All right, now a few of the bad things. There's that mealy bug. It looks like the larva of that lady beetle. Scale insects, nasty critters. Well, a mealy bug is a scale insect, but it's a soft-bodied type of scale insect. There are soft scales that have a soft covering on it that parasites and predators can get to. There are hard scales which are difficult to control. That many times a hard scale, they say you need to consider using a systemic pesticide. Well, we don't really want to do that. So you try to, when you go to a nursery to buy a tree, look at it to be sure it doesn't have any critters on it. It's a good, clean tree. And if you get a $30 tree that they're selling for $5.95 that day, think better of it. All right, aphids. Look at those pretty aphids. Man, that's a lot of food. How you get rid of aphids? A good water hose will do that. Leaf hoppers. All right. These are also sucking insects. They're related to the true bugs. But leaf hoppers, those are things that say, oh, look, leaf hopper, it's gone. Many of them will transmit viral diseases in plants. So these aren't good guys. In fact, some of them, the sharpshooter is one of the leaf hoppers that transmits Pierce's disease, common in grapes. So it has alternate host plants that it will grow up on, and then transmit the disease to your grapes. Milkweed bugs. You see, this is what I mean. High population like that. When you see something like that, those aren't good guys. These, you don't have predatory bugs in pockets like this. The tarnished plant bug. There's an argument. Maybe the tarnished plant bug is good sometimes, and it's bad other times. So it feeds on plants, but it also has some beneficial aspects to it. Leaf-footed bugs, we've all seen these. That's why they're leaf-footed. They have that expansion on one of the leg segments over here. So those are leaf-footed bugs. The green stink bug is another bad guy. Pretty eggs, but there's the green stink bug. There's one that looks similar to it. It's called the southern green stink bug. And the larva, they're, Kathleen, I believe you sent me an image of this one at one time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the marmorated brown stink bug, that is an introduced species. They were working on some specific control of this insect. It's an imported species, will feed on well over 100 different kinds of plants. So it has a very broad dietary behavior, and it's not a good one to have at all, but it's fairly common now. Harlequin bug, you've probably all seen these. They will feed on darn near as many plants as the marmorated stink bug does. It's another stink bug and a very injurious. Leaf beetles. Those leaf beetles, Some of them look almost like the lady beetles over here, but these are leaf beetles. They're very destructive plants. There's some that are long like this. There's even one that is found lives under the water, gets its oxygen as a larva from penetrating into the vascular tissue of water lilies and gets its oxygen that way. So it's an air breather. Spotted cucumber beetle here. So you've seen that. We've heard for years, you want to save a lot of mulch. Mulch your plants, get it. And then the winter, be sure everything is nice and that mulch helps keep the ground moist. Yes, it is also a beautiful hiding place for overwintering cucumber beetles. So in February, when you get that nice warm
The
day,
library is now closed.
all of a sudden you end up with a massive, where in the world the cucumber beetles come from? Well, it's warm. They overwintered during November, December, January, and they're ready to look for something to eat. So that's where you got to watch how sanitation on your yard is critical. All right. I'm pushing the wrong button. There we go. Flea beetles. All right, little red and black flea beetle. You go to point to one or capture one, and lo and behold, it jumps. They characteristically make round holes in the leaves. They spend much of their time in the soil. So that's where they hide. They overwinter in the soil and come out and get on your plants and do that extensive shot hole damage, especially to your spinach and cabbage and all kinds of neat things. Caterpillars, all right, we show these. This one, there is a cutworm larva, and the genistamos on your mountain laurels, and the squash vine borer. There's the larva in the squash vine. There's the borer in the upper right-hand corner. And a few more, the cabbage looper. There's the tent caterpillar's nest. Egg mass that's all glued around the one of the branches of the plant. And the fall webworm on the right. Break those open, allow the birds and the wasps to get at it. You notice the wasps, maybe around the time you have a lot of dill, you're raising black swallowtail larvae out there, and you see several of your plants. Oh, look at one. Man, I just love those things. Next day you go out, you had 8. One day you got 3 left. What happened to them? Well, they probably weren't big enough to go off and pupate. What happened is a red wasp said, oh, now that's dinner. And so a lot of the wasps will eat the friendly caterpillars. Kaufman Field Guide to Insects North America is a really good field guide to identify the insects. This is Malcolm Beck's book on Texas Bug Book. It has a natural mechanism, natural instructions on control, least invasive use of pesticides. This is the 2nd edition by Whitney Cranshaw and David Shetler, the Garden Insects of North America. The first copy I bought was $32. I don't know the price on that, but this is the larva of a Cecropia moth. If you want a picture book, it has a discussion of a number of life cycles, but there are over 3,300 colored photographs in the book. It's garden insects in North America. It has a high percentage of these things. And it gets a little bit about the biology, nothing really on control. he's not caring about how to control at this point. He just wants you to be able to find out what you have. So it has a section on the good bugs that you can find, and has a section on the moths that feed on leaves, the beetles that feed on leaves, those that feed on flowers, those that feed on stems, those that feed on roots. They have broken this down into all different categories of where you find the bugs. And it even has some on the different types of snails that you would encounter as pests. And let me see, spiders, lots of business spiders, because spiders eat bugs and they are beneficial. So with that, I've got one more book I brought in to show. I didn't have an illustration for it. Common Insects of Texas and Surrounding States, a field guide. This is by John Abbott and his wife, Kendra, that she's primarily a photographer. John Abbott had been at the University of Texas, Balcones research for years. He has now moved out of state, but he is Mr. Dragonfly and Damselfly authority. The dragonflies, damselflies of Texas, he's the author of it. So his photographs are dandy in here. It's a pretty fair book, not much on biology, a little bit on identification, where to find these, and the distribution. So with that, it's time to go home.
Great job.